Political Tribalism. By James P. Pierce. The exploration of democratic occultism and orthodox symphonia that was sketched provides a profound critique of how contemporary political ideologies have strayed from a virtuous moral foundation, often reducing governance to superficial power struggles, manipulative rhetoric, and identity politicking. These systems both on the left and right have devolved into dialectics that exploit division rather than foster unity, leading to societal fragmentation. The reflection on how Nazism, National Bolshevism, Nazbol, and related ideologies function within the realm of political opportunism further highlights this breakdown, revealing the absence of a cohesive moral framework to guide both governance and civil society. To expand the thoughts and take them into a direction that considers furthering networks, we must look at how orthodoxy's vision of symphonia, a harmonious relationship between church and state, can provide a blueprint for creating a more virtuous societal structure that transcends the current ideological polarization. In a time where political tribalism, both left and right, has distorted reason, it's crucial to reorient society towards principles that foster a genuine sense of purpose and common good. 1. Symphonia and networks, building in groups and out-groups. In the current polarized ideological landscape, groups form around identity politics, power, and self-interest rather than common moral or spiritual principles. This leads to a society fractured into echo chambers, where the other side is often demonized. The orthodox concept of symphonia suggests a different model, one based on unity through shared spiritual values rather than superficial political alignment. In this model, in-groups would not be defined by arbitrary political affiliations, example left versus right, but by commitment to moral and spiritual virtues, truth, justice, humility, compassion, and love as taught by Christ and the saints. These in-groups would be built around shared goals of promoting the common good, with the church and state working in harmony. These networks would seek to transcend political partisanship by reorienting focus towards virtue, thereby mitigating the toxic us versus them mentality. Meanwhile, out-groups should not be cast as enemies or threats but understood as part of the broader human community. Out-groups should be engaged with compassion and dialogue, rather than vilification. The Orthodox ethos encourages believers to evangelize through example rather than force. This applies not just to matters of faith but to societal discourse as well. This engagement with out-groups can be transformative when grounded in mutual respect, elevating dialogue beyond polarization. Thus, instead of forming in-groups based on superficial or tribal affiliations, the goal of these networks would be to foster spiritual solidarity, align actions with moral imperatives, and extend dialogue to those outside of one's immediate community. 2. The breakdown of current ideologies and their consequences. In recent times, both left and right-wing ideologies have suffered from a moral disintegration, resulting in the loss of reason and the exacerbation of polarization. On the right, movements have occasionally flirted with extremist narratives, such as the fetishization of Nazism or the syncretic philosophy of Dugin's National Bolshevism, as you pointed out. On the left, identity politics often leads to radical tribalism, wherein individuals are judged solely based on their demographic group, race, gender, etc., rather than their character or virtues. These ideologies create an environment of perpetual conflict where the focus is not on mutual flourishing or the common good but on acquiring power, discrediting opponents, and advancing narrow agendas. This has resulted in society's descent into an ideological quagmire, where labeling everything through polarized lenses prevents authentic dialogue, reason, and compromise. The orthodox concept of free will and the rejection of the libertine attitude of individual autonomy disconnected from the divine offers an alternative framework. It stresses that human beings, created in the image of God, possess the freedom to choose good, but this freedom should be oriented towards higher spiritual and communal purposes. When individuals prioritize self-interest or identity-based power over moral responsibility, the outcome is fragmentation and societal breakdown, as we see today. 3. Symphonia's vision, a model for balanced governance. A return to the principles of Symphonia could offer a remedy to this modern polarization. At its heart, Symphonia is not simply about church and state functioning as separate entities that occasionally cooperate, but rather about an ongoing and harmonious relationship where spiritual and secular leadership both contribute to the flourishing of society. Christ must be at the center of this vision, guiding both governance and societal ethics. Checks and balances. A society informed by Symphonia would prioritize virtue and moral responsibility over unchecked power. The ruling authority, whether a monarchy or a republic, would have a system of checks and balances that aligns with divine principles. In this model, a monarch or ruling family could exist, but their power would be tempered by spiritual and moral counsel, perhaps coming from the church or religious leaders who act as stewards of justice, much like the prophets of old. The people's role, importantly, the will of the people should not be neglected. In Symphonia, the people are not passive recipients of governance but active participants in the moral and spiritual health of society. This involves fostering a sense of collective responsibility where every citizen is encouraged to live virtuously and contribute to the common good. The Church's role in moral education and community building becomes crucial here. It would also mean that democracy is not rejected outright but reinterpreted in light of divine guidance and the common good. For moving beyond polarization, a path forward. A society informed by Orthodox Symphonia would prioritize unity over division, dialogue over demonization, and the common good over individual or factional power. To achieve this, reject tribalism, whether right or left. The demonization of opposing ideologies must stop. This doesn't mean relativism, but rather a commitment to seeing others as bearers of the Imago Dei, capable of reason and worthy of respect. Foster networks of virtue. As mentioned, in-groups should be based on virtue, not identity politics. Networks of virtue would encourage citizens to engage in the public sphere not merely for self-interest but for the common good, guided by principles that align with divine will. Spiritual and secular collaboration. The church and state, while distinct, must work in harmony for the good of society. Religious values can and should inform public policy, particularly in areas concerning human dignity, justice, and morality, while respecting the autonomy of secular governance. 5. Addressing ideology as a major problem for society. Polarization has become a major societal issue because ideologies, whether from the left or right, prioritize power over truth and moral integrity. The fixation on occult dialectics, pseudo-religious movements, or extreme ideologies represents a symptom of a deeper moral crisis. This crisis stems from a lack of rootedness in divine truth and an overemphasis on material or self-serving ends. The solution, in line with Symphonia, would be a reorientation towards spiritual truth, which in turn fosters reasoned discourse, ethical governance, and societal peace. By grounding political systems in transcendent moral principles, society can move beyond the harmful polarization that has defined recent times. In conclusion, the orthodox framework of Symphonia provides a compelling vision for both governance and societal order in a time of deep ideological division. It invites a balance between individual freedom and collective responsibility, spiritual truth and secular governance, and moral order amidst a world often dominated by chaos.